And we are back here on Patriots 4th and 2. I am your host today, Derek Havens, and joining me is Steve Balestrieri. We are both PatsFans.com bloggers. Today's episode, we are getting back to our normal schedule, Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. Eastern time here on January 3rd. I want to wish all our listeners a happy new year. As Larry David said, today is the last day to do so and curb your enthusiasm. So I might as well do that right off the top. There is a statute of limitations on the holiday season, Steve. But going back to the last couple weeks, I want to say that I want to appreciate everyone's patience. It's been a really weird last few weeks. I was in the hospital, as we talked about on the last show. Steve, Ian, and Russ filled in for Steve and I normal show during the week, which was awesome. And then during the holidays, it just kind of got a little chaotic with travel. I didn't really have a good setup to broadcast from, so we ended up not doing that 2 weeks ago, or last week. So I apologize. So we are getting back into the swing of things here. Before we kick off everything, we're gonna really, really briefly share some thoughts on the Broncos game, obviously the Bills game, and then talk about the Jets. But before we get into all that, Steve, how are we doing today, man?
We're doing great. It's a beautiful day here. It was a little chilly this morning. Chilly for here, not for Massachusetts.
Right.
It was like in the mid 40s here. So, of course, everyone's all bundled up. But
I'm not sure about your neck of the woods. I'm not sure about your old neck of the woods, but in Massachusetts, I was there for 7 days. I was everywhere from the Cape up to Marblehead on the North Shore, South Shore. I was kind of all over the place, and it was like rainy and about mid 40s almost the entire week. It was a really weird weather week for the holidays.
Yeah, it wasn't great weather here. It was about the same. It was cloudy and yucky the whole time. You know, that storm went from one end of the East Coast to the other and kind of put a damper on things. But hey, we're almost at the end of the football season, and there's obviously going to be big changes coming for the Patriots. And, I'm looking forward to it, and I'm sure we're going to get into all that. But, it's been a disappointing but intriguing seasons because I think they have a better feel for a lot of their younger guys of who they want to keep and who they might be willing to let walk. You know what I mean?
And they're going to have a lot of those decisions coming up here. I mean, I can't believe we're in the last week of the regular season, Steve. It always seems like there's such great anticipation in the first few weeks. Everyone's just so excited to get into it. And then all of a sudden we just kind of fast forward and here we are to the end. And I think that for the Patriots, so many questions loom about the offseason. We've touched on that a little bit the last few weeks, and we'll continue to do that during the offseason because there's so many questions to answer. But in the meantime, they've kind of put a couple things together here over the past 4 to 5 weeks or so. It looks like they're playing harder, or at least most of them. Not that their effort was really in question, but we all kind of expected there to be less effort given the stakes. Yeah. And there hasn't been.
Given their situation, I mean, we kind of expected what we normally see from teams that don't do well. The effort tails off, or if they're losing in the second half of games, they just kind of ramp it down a little. The Patriots have been the opposite. They've played really hard for 60 minutes. There's no lack of effort, on this team. There's no quit Certainly in not. This team. And that's something, the players and the coaches can hang their hat on. I mean, because I think they haven't quit on themselves or their coaches, with maybe one or two exceptions. So,
well, I think that for the Patriots right now, Steve, they obviously want to finish off the season with a win. Let's not kind of bury the lead here, the elephant in the room. Whether you think the talk about Bill potentially being fired or the team mutually parting ways with him, whether you think that is a ridiculous take or not, I think that we've seen enough smoke kind of everywhere surrounding this situation, from a local Boston media to a national media standpoint, that is kind of the lead story of this game, Steve. I mean, how can it not be? How can it not be? Is this Bill Belichick's last game with the New England Patriots as the head coach? If you had to answer that kind of yes or no, which way would you lean right now?
I'm kind of leaning towards this might be his last game, because I think Kraft is frustrated at his age. He wants to go out, with a winner. He's obviously smarting from being snubbed again by the NFL Hall of Fame, which, I'll have to be honest with you. These aren't Homer glasses I'm wearing. If Jerry Jones is in there, why isn't Robert Kraft in there? I mean, come on.
Good
But
point.
all of this, I think, plays into his decision. And I think that he's going to insist that Bill accept at least some help on decision making and personnel wise, on the football side of operations. And I don't think Bill's going to take that. He's had autonomy for 24 years, and he's not going to give that up. That's why I'm leaning toward that this might be his last game.
It's funny, I've been talking about Bill potentially being fired seemingly all season long, and I have myself kind of doubting that right now, Steve. And I honestly think the reason I'm feeling that way, I think it's a little bit of more disbelief than anything. Like, it's hard to really fathom the idea that Bill would not be the head coach of the Patriots. I don't like to do this all the time on the podcast, or I don't write really anymore for Pats fans. Certainly not on a regular basis, haven't in a long time. But when I was writing a lot, or when we've been doing the show, I really don't like necessarily taking this kind of spin. But I mean, for me, if I just go Patriots, like Derek is a Patriots sports fan, Bill's the only head coach I've really ever known. He's been the head coach of the Patriots since I was 10 years old. So it is kind of weird from my perspective, I guess, a little bit. I'm sure there's plenty of people who are listening who feel relatively similar, is that it'd be a really kind of shock to see him actually go, even though I do think now is the time for it to happen. Whether it does or not, I don't know. See, a lot of people throw out, and this is not directed really at you. I mean, you said it, and I'm with you on the take, but I've heard a lot of people say this lately, and I just feel like I want to share something. But a lot of people have said, well, if Robert sits down with Bill and he agrees to have some help on the personnel side, well, as far as we know, that's really never been on the table. So is Bill is he just going to blindly accept that? Like, what do you think? I'm asking you seriously. Like, do you think Bill looks at it and says, yeah, it hasn't been good enough, but I don't want to restart. I don't want to go somewhere else. I have a great setup. If we need to bring somebody else in, then we need to bring, a couple other people in. I could see that, but my hesitancy, my worry about that situation, Steve, is that if it's not someone that Bill likes, does he actually welcome the pecking order? Does he welcome the outside of the box ideas? You know what I mean? I don't know. I have a hard time seeing that match.
Bill doesn't trust people he doesn't know. And that's always been his thing. That's why he's always, brought guys in when they're young. He trains them. He gives them a little bit more on their plate every year. Sometimes as the year goes on, if somebody's doing a good job, he'll add stuff to their plate. But, how many outsiders have you seen come in here? Very few. And usually it's just guys that he's met and liked, and he's given them, an opportunity to stick around for a year and work themselves into a job outside. Brett Bielema, I remember, I want to say it was around 2008, the former Packers defensive coordinator. Was it Dom Capers that he brought in for a year to help with the
Sure.
secondary?
He ended up going over to the Baltimore afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was Dom Capers.
Yeah, and guys like that, but they've only been around, for a year or so, and that's what generally happens. But that's why he doesn't trust guys from outside, and he doesn't want to. Basically, he doesn't want to train another coach on how he likes to do things. And as we all know, Bill does things his way. And that's why I'm kind of leery about this whole situation as well. If they're going to bring back somebody on the personnel side, it'd probably be somebody he's worked with before. That's my take anyway.
I think that biggest thing that's hard is it's not as simple as, hey, you're going to pick this player and they're going to play for me. Well, if Bill doesn't think that player can fit into his system, or he's looking for a player at defensive end to be able to, stop the run, and he brings in someone like Josh Uche versus Anthony Jennings, well, you're going to have a conflict of interest. You're going to have some issues there, and I'm trying to think of something relatively easy just off the top. But.
Well, and again, right to the top of the draft, the number one pick, Bill, might decide, hey, I want this tackle. And somebody else in there might say, but we could get this quarterback. And, what's going to happen then? Is there going to be a tug of war? And see, that's why I'm thinking that he's going to go. I know some people have mentioned Robert Kraft learned something about the Brady incident about letting a guy go maybe a year too early, as in Tom Brady,
Yeah.
And then Kraft watch him win a Super Bowl with another team.
How much do you think that's weighing on the situation?
I think it's weighing hard on this, because what if Kraft decides, okay, Bill, we're going to mutually agree to part ways, and he goes somewhere and hits lightning in a bottle, and Bill, wins the Super Bowl and maybe, breaks Shula's record with another team. Kraft will be, I think, at that point, Kraft will be really smarting, because this would have been 2 times in a row, and I think that's going to weigh on his mind.
I don't think as much credit as Kraft should have for the Belichick move and how he's kind of operated certain things. He should obviously get credit for how things have turned out, obviously.
Yep.
I do think it's fair for him to worry about how this Belichick thing lays out, because whether people want to admit it or not, the Brady, when people look back and think back on history and think about Tom Brady, they'll think of him as a Patriot. That's kind of first and foremost. But how the situation ended absolutely falls on Bill and Robert's legacy somewhere. Like, that's part of their story, I think, when you're talking about their football lives, and I'm not saying they're together. I'm just saying, if you're talking about Robert Kraft, the Brady stuff at the very end, it's gonna kind of come down to it a little bit. It's gonna be brought up, and same for Bill. And I'm sure there's a piece of Robert that wants to make sure that it doesn't end that same way. I'm sure. I don't know. I just don't think, if the team puts out a statement saying that Bill and, Bill's coming back as the coach, or they're doing something, I just don't think a minor shakeup is good enough right now, Steve, for this fan base. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Because I think if you want to argue they shouldn't do something as major as Bill, I would say okay. But I would also argue that doing something minor doesn't really do anything else either. I mean, this is a team that, by all indications, had, I don't want to say like Super Bowl aspirations, this is a team that felt like they could be in the mix to get into the playoffs. I'm not saying win the division. I'm saying that they thought they had addressed what they needed to address enough to get to that wild card spot or whatever. And they've really totally bottomed out this year.
Yeah.
Do you think
And,
that a minor change is good enough for the fan base?
Well, I'll tell you what. I mean, if you look, at one-score games this year, they're 4-8 in one-score games, and it wouldn't have taken much more. A player here or there. We've talked about wide receiver all year. What if they signed DeAndre Hopkins? Do you think some of these one-score games could have flipped? And then you're looking at a very different scenario. Let's just say instead of 4-8, they're 8-4 in one-score games. They'd still be in the mix. And I look at it in a kind of like in a fishbowl type of thing. They weren't that far from winning a lot of these games. Now, the offense has been terrible. The offensive line, to me, is still the major sticking point with this team. And, maybe Hopkins wouldn't have made any difference at all because of the issues with the offensive line. But, they were in all of these games, and you just have to wonder if just a player or two here and there would have made a huge difference.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, Tyquan. I mean, look at even the Tyquan Thornton pick. I mean, he's had opportunities to step up and make plays. I mean, now more than any time you could think of, he's a what was he, 50 overall? I mean, he was a high draft pick. This isn't just some late round guy and you took a flyer because he's really fast. This is a second round draft pick, and he couldn't crack this rotation. Pop Douglas right now, with one game to go, has the most catches for a rookie receiver under Bill Belichick as a head coach at 47. Tyquan Thornton's opportunities were there. If they had made a different selection at receiver, argue with who you want, maybe that player steps up. I mean, there is a butterfly effect to this whole thing, Steve, and that's where I think the rub is. And look, I don't want to bog down too much on this, but again, to circle back to the beginning of the conversation, this is a big storyline of the week. There are a lot of questions. I'm curious how the broadcast handles it. I personally think that it's going to be ho-hum business as usual under the request of Bill. I'm sure Bill's going to say, look, I'm sure the Patriots, the Crafts, Bill probably will all approach CBS and say, look, we know there's a lot of storylines running around. Please, if you want to mention it, so be it, but please don't make a big deal out of it. Please don't show, a lot of extra shots. Because I just think that's, for one, that's just not really Bill's style. For two, I don't think that everything is set in stone yet. I don't know where you fall on this, and this will obviously be my next question for you, and I'll answer it first. But what do you think happens after the year? Because I think that when I say that not everything is set in stone, I honestly believe that the Crafts are still undecided, because I feel like they probably are feeling some of the same emotions or questions that we're bringing up right now. They're probably feeling conflicted. They don't want to see Bill go. They want him to finish his career here. But at the same time, it hasn't been good enough. It is a good time to reset. I wonder if they are looking at the offseason and saying, look, we need to sit down with Bill and we need to hear him out, hear what he has to say. Because there have been reports that Bill's going to, quote unquote, go on the offensive, Steve, and say, look, if we had this player stay healthy, or, hey, the ball bounces a different way in 2 or 3 of these games, we're at this record instead of this record.
Right. I mean, if Kendrick Bourne had stayed healthy.
Yep. Christian Gonzalez, Matthew Judon. I think that makes a difference.
Sure.
I mean,
as good as that defense was, they would have been even better had those two.
I think long story short is I think the Crafts are going to want to hear Bill say, this is how I think we get out of this mess. And I think if his pitch is good enough, I think he is able to stay. I really do. If it's not good enough, I think they have to really question it, because I think it comes down to this top 5 pick. Again, I know nothing's set in stone, but they're going to have a relatively high draft pick. They're going to be asking the same questions that Patriots fans have been asking for months. And do you go quarterback? Which quarterback? Who's there? Do you take a quarterback that's maybe a little early if you miss out on the top 2 guys? Do you take a tackle? Do you take a receiver? It's like there's so many questions. And I mean, everybody around I don't know about your family, everybody around my family was talking to me about this all Christmas long. They all had different takes, every single one of them. And I don't think anyone's really wrong. They could use a top flight receiver. They could use it all. They could use an all pro left tackle. There's no point of having one without the other. They need to do that before the quarterback. The quarterback's the most important piece. I mean, you could go in circles around it.
Right. Well, and I've actually talked with a couple of people this week, and they think that if they improve, the players around him, that Bailey Zappi could be the quarterback, which I'm not on board for. I don't think. I think he could be a really good backup, but his demeanor, and I get it. I mean, you're competitive and, you're preparing to play all the time, but sometimes you just have to take that back seat to the guy who's the starter and, embrace your role. Not saying that you tone it down in terms of your play, but, that's why I'm not even sure they keep him at all. I mean,
right.
They may keep the young kid Rourke and let Mac and Zappi go, or try to trade them somewhere. I don't know. I mean, there's so many questions, and it all starts with who's at the top. Because if Bill's there, it's going to be a different scenario than if they go in a new direction.
Sure. No, I do think it's going to be incredibly, incredibly difficult to navigate these waters. Flat out. I mean, no matter which direction or where you think they're going to go, I really can't think of a scenario off the top of my head, or from someone that I haven't heard from, where this isn't a difficult scenario. It's just like an easy fix. I don't think that you're in an easy fix. By the way, I don't think the Patriots are in a 1-year fix either. I don't think this is just like a one-off season, dust yourself off and pick yourself up off the mat kind of offseason. That might be the Chiefs. That might be the Chiefs who have a better defense. And I'm not talking about, I don't want to draw comparisons, but if you're a team like the Chiefs where you have the quarterback established, your coach isn't going anywhere, your defense is playing pretty good, you just fell short of receivers. Well, they add a couple of receivers, make a couple of tweaks, and they might be able to dust themselves off in an offseason. The Patriots are probably, looking at, I would say at least, 2 would be you've made every right decision. So, I think you're 3 or 4 years away from getting kind of back into the mix of things. But I don't think it's one thing I've kind of come to a realization about, Steve, and I don't know how you feel about it, is I have no argument for the people who say, yes, quarterback is the most important thing, but what good does a quarterback do if you don't have that tackle, if you don't address the tackle situation on this team, if you don't have that stud receiver that every contending team seems to have? I have a hard time arguing against it. I absolutely think Marvin Harrison Jr., for example, is one of, if not the best player in the entire class. So you should just go out and get that player, because like we talked about off air on the phone yesterday or the day before, they just need to flat out make sure they hit a good player. That's first and foremost. That's the first box you got to check. Is this a good player? You need this to be a pillar franchise player. And I have nothing to say if they say receiver or tackle. How could you possibly argue against them taking if someone told you this is going to be a tackle for the next 10 to 12 years, who's going to be, I don't know, a better, maybe even if he's not Joe Thomas, if he's like a better Nate Solder, or I don't know, like you know what I'm saying? Like even if he's not like a generational talent, if he's an all-pro, Pro Bowl left tackle, you got to take it. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I personally am with you. I don't look at Bailey Zappi as a franchise quarterback. I look at him, and if Bill stays, I think Zappi has done enough, in my opinion. I think Zappi's done enough to say, hey, yeah, ride with him as your backup. That's fine. I still think that they should draft a guy. I still think they should sign a veteran potentially. It really just depends on what direction they go. But, if Bailey's here past this year, if Bill's not here, the new head coach would have to like him. But I think at times he's made some good plays. I think you saw it in the last two games, and I do want to talk about the games, and we'll get to the games here after the break. But I think you've seen from Zappi some of the things that he's done. I mean, he continues to extend some plays to kind of keep his eyes downfield, manipulate the pocket a little bit, move around a little bit, and find an open receiver down the field. I think he's done some of those things really well. It's really just about at the end of the day, it's about points. At the end of the day, it's about points, and they're still not putting up points. His numbers are not that much better than Matt's.
With him under center, the offense is a little more exciting because they're getting those explosive chunk plays. But at the end of the day, they're still putting up the exact same amount of points. And, so, yeah, it's, they do get the chunk plays. But, he's, where Jones struggled in a deep game, Zappi's been pretty good. At times excellent in the deep game. And where Zappi struggles is in the short and intermediate game. And we saw that on Sunday where he threw 3 picks. Now, people all talk about quarterbacks and they all have their favorite. I mean, if he's there, I really like the kid from North Carolina. I mean, I keep watching film of him, and I think he would be really exciting. But, as you and I talked, what if they decide before the draft to sign a guy like Kirk Cousins? And you give him a 2 to 3 year contract, and then you draft a guy in, maybe second or third round, and you develop him behind Cousins. And, then with your first round pick, you can either take that tackle that you talked about, or if he's still there, Marvin Harrison. And now all of a sudden your skill positions have really increased, and the opportunity to get a tackle at the top of the second round is still going to be there. So, I mean, there's so many different directions they can go with this. And I keep repeating myself, but it all comes back to who's at the top. Because if Bill is there, I believe it's going to be different than if they bring in somebody else.
I totally agree. Good thoughts on that.
In fact, I believe if Bill is there, they probably will be more apt to sign a quarterback in free agency, like a Kirk Cousins. Somebody mentioned Russell Wilson the other day. I'm really not that hyped on Russell Wilson, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what Yeah, Baker Mayfield, people have mentioned him. I don't see him leaving Tampa.
I don't see that either. I don't see him leaving Tampa either. I think that seems like a situation where even if the clock does strike midnight a little bit next year, so to speak, I could still see him getting a 3 to 4 year contract and at the very least being that bridge guy, which is good. I mean, good for him. I mean, he's been. I know he's been really good this year out of the draft. Yeah, he was a little controversial coming out of the draft, but I know it took him a second to kind of find some traction, but it looks like he's finally caught on a little bit, and he's been very good, Steve, to your point. So, and look, I mean, for the Patriots, I would say I still think if Bill's here, veteran quarterback to me makes the most sense. It makes more sense to me than drafting a guy high. But again, we're talking about big picture stuff, and that is on me. I mean, 100%. We're going to have so much time to get into that. But I think as you head
Right
into this
after
game,
next week.
yeah, and let me ask you. That actually leads me to a question that I was kind of curious about, and let's do that, and then we'll take a break, and then we'll talk about actual games because we're talking about a lot of stuff that's important to the team, but that everyone else is talking about too. But let me ask you this. How soon after this game, win or lose, do you expect some kind of report, statement, whether that's team from somebody? I don't know. I have no idea. How soon after this game are you expecting to hear things about Bill, whether he's staying or going?
The longest I expect this to go on would be 3 days. I think it'll be. Oh yeah. I don't think this is going to drag.
So you and I are a little different on this. Okay, keep going. I like this. Good.
No, I think, I think right after the game on Monday.
Black Monday is what they call it, given that's, where head coaches normally get fired. I can't see him going on that day, Steve.
No, but I think him and Kraft are going to sit down on that day, and they're going to come to a decision. That's why I think it's going to come quickly. Either Kraft's going to come out, by Tuesday or Wednesday at the latest and say Bill is returning to fulfill his contract, which Todd mentioned a little while ago in one of our comments. But I think, it's going to come quickly. I don't think they're going to drag this out. So
I think it's going to be closer to 2 weeks because I think they're going to. I don't think they want to go too long because then it becomes just like the only storyline in the coaching carousel. So 2 weeks might be a little long. I'd be surprised if it was shorter than a week though, because I do think they're going. I don't think they're going to want to look rushed, even if they've already made up their mind. I don't think they're going to want to look rushed. I don't think they would want to do it on Black Monday with a lot of the other stuff. I just don't see them cutting him the day after the season, firing him the day after the season ends. I just don't see that in any capacity. I don't really see them. I don't really even envision the headline saying Patriots fire Bill Belichick. I just have a hard time envisioning that. That's why I think if they go the mutually parted ways route, it takes a week or so.
Yeah, I think they'll release a statement if they don't bring him back, saying they've mutually agreed to part ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I could see a scenario where it's something like that, but it goes on. After several days of internal discussions, the Patriots and Bill Belichick have decided to mutually part ways. Robert Kraft, whatever, puts out a statement. I don't know. I still don't know. I think what I just want to end this by saying, end this whole conversation by saying this. I do think it's time for the Patriots to make some big changes and prepare a little bit more for, because what they've shown you the last few years is the current situation, to me, at least in my eyes, is not working. From a draft standpoint, from a personnel standpoint, from a coaching standpoint, I think there's a lot of coaching issues on the team. Now, I think, for example, DeMarcus Covington and Gerard Mayo should have a ton of credit for how well they're coaching that front seven and how well it's playing right now. I still wonder, and it hurts me to say this, I still wonder about Troy Brown and the receivers coach thing. They were looking at other guys, and I'm wondering if they made a mistake by sticking their loyalty, because Bill is loyal maybe to a fault. And I love Troy as a player, and it hurts me to say this, but I do have some questions about that side of the ball. I'm worried about the offensive line and how they're being coached and some of these things. I just don't think you can just leave it as like a minor change. I think you need to go in there with big wholesale changes. And I'll tell you right now, Mike Reese has thrown it around 98.5 a few times now when he's been doing some guest spots over the last week. He's floated out Josh McDaniels coming back and basically him and Bill taking over the offense. I mean, Bill O'Brien and Josh essentially being the quarterback coach and them kind of working in unison and taking more off of Bill's plate. And he even went as far as saying any player they take on the offensive side of the ball, the two of them would approve of. He basically said that they would, go over Bill to pick out offensive players. And I just can't see that happening. And I'm not sure I even love that idea, because that to me seems like just kind of regurgitating the same process. I don't know, Steve.
Right.
Did you hear any of that? And what are your thoughts on that? Before we
Yeah,
take
well, and the whole Troy Brown thing speaks to what I was talking about earlier. Bill doesn't trust people that he doesn't know. So, sometimes he could be loyal to a fault, possibly. Troy Brown is one coach that I think, and like you said, love Troy as a player, but I have questions of him as a coach when you see the same mistakes happening time after time with your wide receivers, and the other guy, Cam Acord. I mean, nobody spends more money on special teams than Bill does, and nobody practices as much special teams as the Patriots do. And for 3 or 4 years now, their special teams have been terrible. And I understand you have 2 rookie kickers. You have to live with that. But it's not just this year. It's been ongoing. And the coverage teams haven't been good. The return game, I mean, yeah, they had a return for a touchdown on Sunday, but the return game has been terrible. And so, it's like maybe it's time to bring in a new special teams guy as well.
I mean, that's one of the ones that I would have on my list. I mean, honestly, I think they need I've said a whole lot, and I know there's just so many different permutations and so many questions and so many different takes. I think they need wholesale changes. Special teams is certainly up there. Offense is up there. And I don't mean really even the coordinator or the play calling. I'm talking about position wise. I just think they need bigger changes, Steve. And let's just take a break here because we're almost 37 minutes in and we've been rolling on this. And there's a lot of questions, and we're going to keep diving into all that. But I do think we set the table appropriately for this regular season finale. So let's step aside here for podcast purposes just for a second. When we come back, we're going to talk about the last couple of games for the Patriots and preview the upcoming game versus the Jets and the final week of the NFL regular season action. We'll be back right after this. All right, and we are back here on Patriots 4th and 2. Derek Havens, Steve Balestrieri, we're both PatsFans.com bloggers. I want to quickly go ahead and thank everyone for tuning in live. If you're downloading it later, we're recording this right now. It is 11:41 a.m. on January 3rd, 2024. Happy New Year to everyone. Please subscribe to us on YouTube and Apple Podcasts. Like, share, leave us a review. Keeps us high in the podcast ranking so other Patriots fans can find us. We spent the first 37 minutes, Steve, talking about the show. 37 minutes of the show, we've been talking about all the kind of next week questions, because ultimately that is that is the kind of big elephant in the room, because what happens in this game could directly determine, potentially the outcome for next year. But I do think that there's a chance. I mean, certainly if this sounds like I'm mocking you, but I'm being condescending, but I'm not. But if your take is right and they do move quickly with Bill, there's a chance that our next podcast is them talking about keeping or firing Bill Belichick or parting ways with, right? Because we don't think that he'd actually quote unquote get fired. So it's going to be interesting to say the least, how that plays out. But we've spent a lot of time on that so far today, and we will continue to spend a lot of time on that. I mean, I honestly, we've said this a while ago, and this is just a product of when your team is in turmoil and not winning. I have a really good feeling that our best shows are going to be the next few shows and not what the end of this season, because it's been, a lot of the same chop. I think as much as people love Patriots football who listen to this podcast, I think there are a lot of people who are just like, just put me out of my misery. The season needs to just stop, because it just seems like wash, rinse, repeat in so many levels. But they are still competing, Steve, and I want to spend 2 seconds talking about the Broncos game because we didn't get to do a show last week. The Patriots, again, played hard in the game, Steve. Went out, played spoilers a little bit. I thought made Russell Wilson look really flustered. Obviously, that situation with Sean Payton is a whole other topic for a different day. We're not even going to get into all that. But give me your thoughts quickly on the Broncos game before we get into the Bills game.
Oh, wow. The Broncos game was a shocker, actually, to me. Because traditionally, that's just one of those places where they never played well.
Miami, just name a few.
Yeah, Miami and Denver, the two places, even during the Brady years when they were rolling, they never played well in either one of those places for the most part. I mean, yeah, they had, the outliers here and there, but I was really surprised in that game at how well they played in a good way. I thought the defense was outstanding once again, and the offense, they got some explosive plays, and that's what we were looking for. It was the opposite of what had normally been transpiring, where the offense played okay in the first half and disappeared in the second. This one, they played really well that third quarter. I mean, Patriots have only scored like 20 points a handful of times this season in an entire game, and they had 20 points in the third quarter.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was definitely a game that you could see coming a little bit early because of how well the Patriots, were playing. But it was a little bit of a shock again because, like you said, of where the venue, where they were playing the game and stuff. And then, you leave that game on Christmas Eve night. You leave that game with a win, riding relatively high. Aside from everyone aside from Trent Brown in the Patriots locker room video that they released looked happy about the win. They looked like they were fired up. They've gotten a little bit of wind in their sails, so to speak. They go to Buffalo, and let's share our thoughts on that Bills game from last week. And they start off with a Jalen Reagor kickoff return, which was, just perfect blocking. How you want to draw it up. Your returner gets a ton of lead blocks. He's able to put a move on one person, spins past the kicker, hits the juice button, and really just absolutely flew. Makes you wonder why it took Reagor so long to get that top kickoff spot, because he's shown some flashes and some ability there. And if Bill stays going into next year, we talked about this off air the other day too. We absolutely could see Jalen Reagor sticking around as kind of like that fifth receiver to fill out depth as well as a special teams ability. And I look, he needs some polishing. There's no doubt. He still had a couple issues with drops at times. One of the Zappy interceptions was pretty clearly on Reagor running the wrong route. But then he has a couple of really nice catches, and he offers some value on special teams. He's been kind of interesting. After the Patriots had that little burst, though, Steve, it kind of simmered down and the Bills pulled away. Ultimately, I still think some Patriots fans, let me rephrase that. I still think some Patriots fans are overvaluing how much Zappy has done for this team. And I know they're not necessarily in the point where we can be pointing fingers. I'm not pointing fingers to anyone. But I do think if people really start and looking at the numbers, the Patriots flat out scored 7 points on offense and defense. 7 points in the first half, 7 points in the second half. They're not scoring points still. It's still, whether it's Mac or Zappy or whatever. I know I'm not putting every interception on Zappy, although I do think a couple were on him, or at least partially on him. I would say the offense is still not moving the ball. It's just a little bit more efficient at times, a little more exciting at times because of the ability that Zappy has to keep the play going and not totally collapse like we saw Mac Jones do way too many times down the stretch.
Oh yeah, and again, they started off great, the kickoff return, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, special teams makes a big play. Great block by Matthew Slater on that kick return, by the way, because it looked like the wall was kind of pinching in on him, on Reagor about the 25-yard line, maybe 30, and Slater makes that block and he's able to squeeze through there, and then he makes that one guy miss, and then he's off to the races. So, at that point, I was like really excited, right? So, hey, they got it going on. This is the way to start a game in Buffalo, where, in the last few years, they've had trouble, because of Josh Allen. Defense, I thought, played great in the first half. As much as they kept turning the ball over, one was a pick six, but, the Bills had 3 turnovers, 4 turnovers in the first half. And, I thought the Patriots defense held pretty strong. I mean, they held them to a couple of field goals. And, one was a return for a touchdown. They scored one on the other. But, even at 20-14 at the half, they were still right in this football game, as bad as they played offensively. And you had the feeling, well, if they iron out the issues, they'll make a game of it, which they did. I mean, the Bills went up by 2 scores right after the half, but then they came back, they scored a touchdown. And, again, it's a 5-point game. And it's still anyone's football game. All you need is that one play, right? And you could steal a game and really put a damper in the Bills' playoff hopes at that point. But, credit to the Bills. They hung tough defensively. Their defense played really well. And, they held Josh Allen to really pedestrian numbers. 15 of 30 for 169 yards. No touchdowns. And the 1 interception. I mean, if you had gone into that game saying that that's what they were going to do to Josh Allen, you would think they win that football game. But
absolutely,
yeah. And we've said this so many times. They played just well enough to lose another close game.
Yeah, they played well enough, and it just seemed kind of like the Bills were just kind of comfortable with winning the game that way, Steve. It just felt like they were okay with just letting the Patriots spin their wheels a little bit. I'm not saying they probably were they looked tight on the sidelines. The Bills did when the game started. Josh Allen had a look on his face on the bench of that game when Rager had that return, like, this is how today's going to go. Because he's had a lot of success against the Patriots in the last few years, obviously. And I think that he kind of felt like it was going to be kind of a breeze in, breeze out situation. And that was going to be the end of it. Yeah.
Yeah. See, yeah. I had the opposite feeling. I know, he said before that first game in Foxborough, and he's like, a lot of people are looking past this. The Patriots defense is really good. And I think people aren't giving them enough credit. And he was saying all the same things this week. I think he came into the game knowing, for his part, against the Patriots defense, it was going to be a rock fight for him. And it turned out it was. I mean, I thought they did a really good job of, limiting their passing game. And again, I mean, their wide receivers didn't do much in this game. It was Dalton Kincaid who had more than half of their passing yardage.
Yeah, he was a nice pickup. He was a nice pickup for that offense, and you can see why they liked him coming out in the draft. And I guess my thought was for this game, I think he it felt like to me that Josh would probably look at the game as more of an abnormality, the first game. And I thought that he would, I thought they thought it would probably be a little bit easier, towards the end, but maybe I'm wrong. I did hear Allen's first game thoughts, and I do think the Patriots defense is good, but I just think the Bills have so often the last couple of years played with their food with the Patriots just because they're so limited offensively, and they have been so limited offensively for so long that I can understand that. But regardless, I think that the Patriots were able to make a couple of plays. I thought Josh Allen really wasn't good in the game as a whole. And, they were able to really control and dictate the whole game, but it just felt like they just couldn't put points on the board. The Patriots just couldn't put points on the board, and I thought Allen just looked off, and maybe that defense was getting to him. I mean, say that, but
they brought a lot of pressure on him in the first half.
They did. I don't think they wanted to let him get comfortable in the pocket. I don't think they wanted to get him into a rhythm, because I do think, even though he's certainly light years ahead of where he was a couple of years ago, I still think if you can get to him early, and this goes for a lot of quarterbacks, you get to a quarterback early, and they're probably not going to be the same throughout the game. And that we've seen that. I mean, whether it's Tom Brady or Bailey Zappi, we've seen quarterbacks from all over the spectrum get affected by pressure. But let's switch over to the Jets. The Patriots now, they're in a weird situation, and I guess I should probably back this up. Right now, the Patriots are 4-12. Okay, so before we get to the Jets, I have to go ahead and do my quick "The Tank Continues" segment. So we have a weird situation here. Carolina. Well, I guess the Bears own Carolina's pick. Carolina is the worst team in the league officially, 2-14. Whether they win or lose this week, Chicago has the number 1 overall pick. Steve, right now the Patriots have the 3rd overall pick, between 3 and 4, kind of bouncing around right now. This week, Steve, the Patriots could end up with as high as the 2nd pick in the draft and as low as the 7th pick in the draft. I think realistically is more between 3 and 5. But this game has some really big implications for the Tank. Just thought it was worth mentioning. I'm not going to get into strength of schedule. It seemingly is all over the place. I will go ahead and read you a list of teams here shortly with my final thoughts of teams that the Patriots need to root for this week if they want a better draft position. Before we do all that, let's talk about the game. Regular season finale. I don't know what side of the argument our listeners are on, whether they want the team to lose for the better draft pick, whether they want the win. Steve, I'm telling you right now, I'm picking the Patriots to win this game. Until the Jets show that they can beat the Patriots, I don't care how bad the team is, I will know that things. And part of me can make the case that you want the team to lose. If you were fed up with the situation and how this year has gone, you could certainly make the case that losing to the Jets and putting a bad taste in that organization's mouth going into the offseason could be the tonic that it needs in order to get things changing. If you think that this year was just a really crummy year and things just didn't break their way, and you want to make sure that Bill goes out on top, especially if it's his last game as the Patriots head coach, he has to beat the Jets, right, Steve?
Well, and let's just put it in context. If you're in the camp, not saying you specifically, I'm just saying
general.
Yeah. If you're in the camp thinking the Patriots will tank this game, you're living in dream world.
Yep.
Because this is, if they're playing San Francisco or Baltimore or somebody, they're playing the Jets. And if there's any team Bill wants to beat and beat badly, every time they play, it's the Jets. And what's it up to right now? 15 in a row? Bill won't, we don't know if he's going to be back or not, but we've already beat that one to death today. But do you think he wants to go out in his last game in New England, possibly by losing to the Jets? No. So they're going to have a really good game plan for this game. And I'm with you for the first time in quite a few weeks. I'm picking them to win this week because, one, they're at home, and two, it's the Jets, and Bill takes Jets week really serious. So I just think this one is you can throw out everything. This is Jets week and last game of the season. And, barring catastrophic mistakes out there, I think they have a really good shot of winning this game.
They do. Because the Jets can't get out of their own way. And more importantly, the Jets have a hard time scoring points, which helps a team like the Patriots who can't score either. So it really comes down to who's going to screw up less offensively. I think that Zappe, for the most part, has done an okay job of not turning the ball over, aside from this last week, obviously. So we'll see. I have no idea. I certainly wouldn't pencil in the Patriots winning a game.
Oh no,
I absolutely think the Jets can win the game. I'm just telling you, I'm not picking the Jets to win this game because they've shown for over a decade they can't beat this team. so, so
no. I mean, it's
I'm just assuming they're going to. I'm sorry.
15 games in a row. I
I mean,
believe it's 15.
the Patriots were done a huge favor by the Cardinals for coming back versus the Eagles to win that game. But right now, I mean, assuming that all the teams around them win, Steve, I mean, right now, a win versus the Jets is probably going to get you to, like the 5th pick. And I think people would be pissed. I think that really doesn't help you at all. At least with a 2 or 3, pick, you're still right there in the mix of quarterback, receiver. You have your pick. You start getting to like 4, 5, 6. Now you need things to happen. As I know I'm working the draft into this a little bit, but this is the type of season it's been. When you win 4 games and you're going into the last week of the season, this is the kind of game that you anticipate. So give me your 3. Well, do you want to get into 3 keys yet? I guess so. If the Patriots, Steve, are going to win this game, how are they going to do it? How are the Patriots going to win this game? Give me your 3 keys. Hold off on the prediction. 3 keys to victory.
Okay, I think number 1 key is the defense will have to step up the way they've been playing and, snuff out the Jets running game. They've been very good at that. Yeah, actually, on Sunday was the first time since New Orleans game that they've allowed 100 yards rushing. So they've been outstanding against the run all season long. I think you have to stop the Jets' running game, and you have to force turnovers, which the Jets are prone to do. And, I think if you stop the running game, force turnovers, that's your number 1 key. 2 is you have to get those chunk plays in the passing game. And I know the Jets defense is really good, but you have to scheme up some ways to get some chunk plays in there. And you can't win the game by going 3 and 4 yards against that defense all the way down the field. It's not going to happen. So you need some chunk plays in there. And I think the third one is, special teams, once again, is going to have to play a role. And other than the opening kickoff last week, it hasn't been there for them this year. So that has to change.
Yeah, it absolutely has to change. And I all good keys to the game. For me, I just look at it and say, for one, this team just needs to not shoot themselves in the foot offensively. I mean, they make things, the Patriots it's really actually funny. They make things so hard on themselves by continuously putting themselves behind the sticks. And speaking of sticks, if I see one more 3rd and 11 pass that goes 5 or 6 yards, I'm going to flip out. So we'll get to that at some point over the offseason because
the nibbling. It's like,
it's tiresome.
Or even on like a 3rd and 4, they throw a 3-yard pass. Why?
Exactly. It's constant. I mean, and that to me, that's got to be coaching. It happens so often that I can't imagine. It happens a couple of times. You say, wow, the player ran a bad route. You say, what were they thinking? Whatever. You start seeing it throughout the year, throughout what seems like 2 or 3 years now. I'm sorry. I blame the coaching staff at some point. They have to be watching the same film we do. I can't imagine it was drawn up 3rd and 11. Let's do a 6-yard in cut here. I don't know. If it is, it is. But I just don't. I just have a hard time rationalizing that whole thing. It bothers me, clearly, as you can tell. So for me, it's just they got to stop making mistakes and stop. They make things so hard on themselves by constantly putting themselves behind the numbers. So eliminating those mistakes offensively, I think will be huge. Number 2 is points are at a premium here in this game. I think the red zone is key. Obviously, when you're facing a team that is inept like you on offense, the more I think you could see a lot of field goals in this game. I'll pull up the over-under while we're talking, because I am kind of curious what the over-under and the spread is for this game. So I'll look at DraftKings while I'm pulling up my third key here. But I have to think that it's a low number, and you expect a lot of field goals, kind of an ugly game. And the third one to me, Steve, is going to be actually the running game again. The Patriots, depending on how this game plays out, they could end up with less than 3.2 yards per carry as allowed as a defense, and that would be a huge milestone to hit. Hasn't been done in I want to say over a decade. So it's really, really impressive. And I think DeMarcus Covington, speaking of coaching on that defensive line, deserves a lot of praise. I think you've seen Christian Barmore elevate to a new level because of his dominance against the run. We knew about what he could do versus the pass. Anthony Jennings having a huge year, I think, goes to him, Covington and Mayo's ability to teach him. He looks really stout. They've done a really nice job against the run. So I want to give those guys up front some credit, but I think if you're able to continue to do that and do that so well, you're putting the ball really in Zach Wilson's hands. That's where you want the game, in his hands, to go ahead and make an opportune play. So I'm going to go ahead and say, continue with the run defense, put the ball in Zach Wilson's hands, and I think you're going to come away with the victory here, Steve.
Totally agree. And I think they're going to play hard in this game.
By the way, over-under for this game is 30.5, and the Patriots are favored by 2 points. So I'm actually, I think that the number for the spread, I think the number should be 3, not 2, personally, because I think it'll be a field goal game. 30.5. I guess we'll have to see what the prediction is, Steve. And I'll go to you first. Give me your prediction for the game.
Like I said earlier, this is the first time in several weeks that I'm going to pick them to win. I think they will, 16-10.
I'm going to go 16-12 Patriots. I think that the Patriots get the only touchdown of the game. Of course, we've been saying that, thank you, that we've been saying that this team is going to be 2 inept offenses and they're going to explode and it's going to be like 56-49. But
that would be a shocker.
But I'm expecting the Patriots to win a low-scoring, ugly game. It could come down to a field goal. Chad Ryland, are you ready for the call? Not so sure about that. We'll see. I still think they're going to win this game, Steve. I'm saying 16-12. Give me your final thoughts on anything we've talked about today. We've hit a gamut of different issues. Again, we're going to be returning back to our more normal schedule now, and we're going to have so much to talk about next week. But leaning into this final week, Steve, the regular season finale before the postseason, the AFC playoff picture is a total debacle. It's going to be a lot of permutations left. Give me your final thought, whether it's on that, the Patriots, anything you want to talk about.
Yeah, looking at the AFC and the playoffs, I don't know what it is. I still have problems believing in this Baltimore team. I know right now they're firing on all cylinders, and they may end up in the Super Bowl and win it. I don't know. There's something about that team that when I watch them, I just have the feeling that they're not going to be able to put it all together for that long. So we'll see how that is. And in the NFC, as you and I talked about on the phone, we watched that Philadelphia defense get old and slow seemingly overnight, right? So I think it comes down to, San Francisco, maybe Dallas. I like San Francisco to come out of the NFC. So maybe we're going to see that rematch with San Francisco and Baltimore. But I like the 49ers to win it all. I really like that football team. And their offense is fun to watch. Unlike this version of the Patriots offense.
Yeah, no, I I totally get it. I'm with you. For me, I have a hard time going into this game and just seeing Patriots Jets, Steve. I really do. I'm too clouded from the Bill perspective, the storyline of that whole thing, the draft fallout. Look, I I've never told Patriots fans how to feel. I never would. Everyone's kind of, everyone handles watching their team lose differently. And look, I don't think that the people who want the team to win every single game possible because they're a fan, I don't think they're wrong. And I think the team that kind of threw in the towel on this team for this year and it just wants what's best for the organization moving forward, I don't think they're wrong. I think both have valid points, but this game has massive ramifications from a draft perspective. I think it has massive ramifications. I wouldn't say that the game does, but the season does for the future of the organization with Bill. I am just fascinated to see what comes next, Steve, because we're finally getting to a head here where decisions are going to be made. And I just want to see this organization make a couple of firm, direct, assertive moves to get back on track. And I think that's going to happen right after this week. So I'm excited to see, what happens here. As far as who the Patriots want to root for to win this week, you're rooting for Washington to win this week, Arizona, the Giants, the Chargers, the Titans. You're rooting for all those teams to win. I believe you're also rooting for the Falcons over the Saints. I want to say I'll look into that. And you can follow. You can check it out on Twitter. And obviously our handles are right here if you're watching on YouTube. Steve, another good show. It wasn't really as football oriented as maybe one would expect after taking 2 weeks off. There was a lot of air to clear.
Yeah, it had to do with the Patriots. So. But right. And again, when you're looking at the grand scheme of things, the season ends on Sunday, but that's when a disappointing season comes to an end, but that's when everything's really going to heat up with this team. So what comes after that is going to be very intriguing to watch. So
I'm with you. I am with you. And look, I'll say this just to end the show here. Steve and I, we pretty much have done a show every week, at least one show, sometimes two, if it's been enough news to really kind of go into it. It's almost always one a week. Usually on Wednesday. I know the last couple of weeks have got kind of messed up because of my personal stuff, because of traveling, because of the holidays. We'll continue that even into the off season, especially the first few weeks. We'll be still talking about the team. There's going to be news kind of flying about here. There's going to be a lot of different, draft talk to get into, draft order, the postseason. We'll still be here, so look for us next week. I want to thank everyone for listening to this episode of Patriots 4th and 2. Again, Derek Havens, Steve Balestrieri. We're both PatsFans.com bloggers. Be sure to check out PatsFans.com. At the head of the helm there, Ian Logue. Steve does some great stuff, a bunch of other contributors on there, so we appreciate if you check out that. If you have a moment, please subscribe to us on YouTube, like, share, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Keeps us high in the podcast ranking so other Patriots fans can find us. I hope you all have a great rest of your week. Again, Happy New Year. Happy to have you all here as we head into the offseason. A lot to talk about next week. We will see you then. Thanks for listening.